We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Deceit. Dominic Vaughan built things. First with his hands as a construction worker, then with his mind as he rose to become one of Boston's most respected structural engineers. At 43, he understood stability in buildings and in life. His corner office overlooked the skyline he had helped shape, but lately, his attention was drawn not to the city's steel and glass monuments, but to the photograph on his desk. Him and Vanessa on their wedding day 15 years ago. He ran his thumb across Vanessa's smiling face. Those green eyes had once looked at him with unfiltered adoration. Now, they barely seemed to register his presence. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Vaughan, your wife called. She's canceling dinner again. Said something about a gallery showing running late." "Thanks, Maura." Dominic's voice betrayed no emotion, though his jaw tightened. "Third cancellation this month. Same excuse." That night, Dominic drove past the Morton Gallery. Vanessa's car wasn't there. He sat in his Audi, rain drumming on the roof, contemplating what he already knew but hadn't admitted. The deceptions had started small. Subtle changes in her appearance, new passwords on her phone, the scent of unfamiliar cologne when she returned from yoga. Dominic wasn't a man who acted on suspicion alone. Evidence. Facts. These were the foundations of his world. The next morning, he called an unmarked number. "Mercer Investigations." "Ms. Mercer? I need your services." Rhonda Mercer had built her reputation tracking down missing persons and unfaithful spouses. Stocky and perpetually dressed in earth tones, she had eyes that missed nothing. "Follow my wife for 2 weeks. Document everything." Dominic threw himself into his work while waiting. The Riverside development needed structural revisions, and he welcomed the distraction. His associate, Leo Fitzpatrick, noticed the change. "You're here until midnight, 3 days straight. Everything okay at home?" Leo asked, leaning against Dominic's doorframe. Leo had been there from the beginning, Dominic's roommate in college, best man at his wedding. He knew Dominic's history like few others did. Just focused. "Vanessa still doing those late showings?" Dominic looked up sharply. "You've noticed?" Leo shrugged. "Barb saw her having lunch with some woman at Harrington's twice this week. Said they seemed close." Dominic's pencil snapped between his fingers. Vanessa had grown up in wealth, the daughter of renowned cardiac surgeon Howard Harris. From an early age, she'd been groomed for a life of culture and status. Her mother Diana had pushed her toward suitable matches, sons of business magnates and politicians. But Vanessa had fallen for Dominic during her rebellious arts college phase, captivated by his raw determination and authenticity. Howard had initially disapproved. "A construction worker with community college dreams? You could do better, Vanessa." But Dominic had proven himself. Night school, scholarships, internships while working full-time. By the time they married, he'd earned Howard's grudging respect and a starting position at Preston and Associates. Vanessa had been his champion then, defending him against her mother's subtle barbs at social gatherings, proudly introducing him as the man redesigning Boston's riverfront. But somewhere along the way, as Dominic's career consumed more of his time, something changed. 2 weeks later, Rhonda Mercer placed a manila folder on Dominic's desk. "I always give clients the option to hear it from me first," she said, her expression professionally neutral. "I prefer to see for myself." After she left, Dominic opened the folder. Inside were dozens of photographs, meticulously labeled with dates and times. Vanessa entering a luxury apartment building on Beacon Hill. Vanessa in a tall, athletic blonde laughing over wine on a balcony. Vanessa pressing the woman against a car, their lips locked in an embrace that left no doubt about their relationship. The woman was identified as Brooke Zimmerman, 38, gallery curator at the Morton Gallery, resident of the penthouse apartment at 457 Beacon Hill. Single, successful, with a reputation for a discerning eye in both art and women. Dominic's hands didn't shake as he reviewed the evidence. His mind, trained to identify structural weaknesses, was already analyzing patterns. 15-year patterns. The late nights had begun 9 months ago, coinciding with the Morton Gallery's new exhibition featuring bold new artists exploring identity. He closed the folder, straightened his tie, and made a call. Maura, clear my schedule for the next week. Family emergency. That night, when Vanessa returned home smelling of wine and wearing the diamond earrings he'd given her for their anniversary, Dominic smiled and asked about her day. She spoke animatedly about a new artist they were featuring, never mentioning Brooke. You seem happy, he observed. The gallery's doing well. She kissed his cheek distantly. I'm exhausted. Don't wait up. As she headed upstairs, Dominic watched her, seeing not the woman he'd married but a stranger wearing her face. His phone vibrated with a text from Leo. Drink tomorrow? You look like you need it. Dominic texted back, not drinking, planning. In their bedroom, he opened his laptop and began researching Brooke Zimmerman more thoroughly than even Rhonda had. Everyone had vulnerabilities. Everyone had secrets. And Dominic Vaughn, the man who could identify the weakest point in any structure, was determined to find them. Chapter 2. The Architect of Ruin. The Rusty Anchor was far from Dominic's usual establishments. Tucked beneath a railway overpass in South Boston, it catered to dock workers and those seeking anonymity. Leo arrived to find Dominic at a corner booth, a glass of water before him, his laptop open. Jesus, Dom. When you said planning, I thought you meant divorce lawyers, Leo said, sliding into the booth. I'm gathering information. Dominic turned the screen, showing dozens of files labeled. Bank statements, property records, social media archives. This is thorough, Leo said carefully. Almost like you're building a case. I'm building leverage. Dominic had discovered that Brooke Zimmerman came from modest beginnings in Western Massachusetts. Her mother, Patricia, had raised her alone, working as a nurse at Mercy Hospital. Brooke had clawed her way into the art world through scholarships and ruthless networking, eventually becoming the youngest curator at the prestigious Morton Gallery. Her relationship with Vanessa had begun professionally. Vanessa's family connections had opened doors to exclusive collections. But the affair had started during a gallery fundraiser 9 months ago. Credit card records showed hotel charges, expensive gifts, weekend trips carefully disguised as art acquisitions. Dom, I get the anger, but this. Leo gestured at the screen. This is obsessive. It's methodical. There's a difference. Dominic closed the laptop. When I was 16, my father walked out on my mother and me for a younger woman. Left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. Mom worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat while he started a new family and pretended we never existed. Leo knew this story, but he listened anyway. I swore I'd never be powerless like that again. Vanessa isn't just leaving me. She's tried to erase 15 years like they meant nothing. I won't allow that. So what's your plan? Divorce her and take half? That seems fair given Massachusetts law. Dominic's smile was cold. I'm not interested in fair. I'm interested in justice. And for that, I need to understand all the players. Over the next week, Dominic constructed a meticulous timeline of Vanessa and Brooke's relationship. He hired additional investigators to dig deeper into Brooke's past. He reviewed his own finances, moving assets, creating contingencies. Meanwhile, at home, he played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. He bought Vanessa flowers, suggested weekend trips she predictably declined, and expressed interest in visiting her gallery. Actually, we're closing for renovations next month, she lied smoothly. But I appreciate the thought. Dominic noted how easily the lies came to her now, how she no longer showed the slightest hint of guilt. His investigator called with an unexpected discovery. Brooke Zimmerman's birth certificate lists father as unknown, but I found hospital records suggesting a connection to someone prominent. The records were sealed, but there was a substantial trust fund established for her by an anonymous donor around the time of her birth. Keep digging, Dominic instructed. That evening, Vanessa mentioned her father for the first time in weeks. Dad's having his retirement gala next month. We should both attend. Howard Harris, at 70, was finally stepping down from his position as chief of cardiology. The gala would be the social event of the season, with Boston's elite in attendance. Wouldn't miss it, Dominic replied, watching her reaction carefully. Great. I'll be organizing part of it with the hospital board. She hesitated. And Brooke, she's curating an art auction for the event. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Brooke, the gallery curator I've mentioned. She's brilliant with charity events. I look forward to meeting her. That night, Dominic accessed Vanessa's laptop while she slept. Her password, Monet 1984, her favorite artist and birth year, hadn't changed in years. He found hundreds of messages between her and Brooke, tracing the evolution of their affair. The early hesitation, the passionate declarations, the meticulous planning to avoid discovery. But among the expected, he found something unusual, references to Howard that seemed oddly familiar between Vanessa and her lover. Your father called me again about the exhibition, Brooke had written. He's always had a soft spot for you, Vanessa replied. Sometimes I think he prefers you to me. Dominic stared at the screen, a theory forming. Howard Harris had always taken an unusual interest in Brooke's career, offering connections and opportunities. Dominic had assumed it was because of Vanessa, but what if there was more? The next day, he visited Howard under the pretense of discussing the gala. Howard's office at Massachusetts General Hospital overlooked the Charles River, its walls lined with awards and photographs chronicling a distinguished career. Dominic, good to see you. Vanessa mentioned you'd be attending the retirement event. Wouldn't miss it, especially with Brooke Zimmerman handling the art auction. Vanessa speaks highly of her. Howard's expression flickered almost imperceptibly. Yes, she's quite talented. The hospital foundation is lucky to have her involvement. How did you meet her? Through Vanessa. Howard busied himself with papers on his desk. I believe so, though I've supported the Morton Gallery for years. Dominic noticed a photograph, partially hidden behind others on the credenza. Howard with a younger woman who wasn't Diana. He recognized the nurse's uniform of Mercy Hospital. Patricia, Howard said, following his gaze. An old colleague. We worked together during my residency. Patricia Zimmerman, Brooke's mother. As Dominic left the hospital, pieces began falling into place. He made a call to his investigator. I need DNA samples from Howard Harris, Brooke Zimmerman, and Vanessa. Discreetly. That's not exactly legal, the investigator warned. I'll double your fee, and I want the results before the retirement gala. Leo confronted him that evening. Dom, you've missed 3 client meetings. The Riverside project is falling behind. Whatever you're planning, it's consuming you. I'm fine. This isn't you. The surveillance, the secret investigations, you're turning into someone I don't recognize. Dominic looked at his oldest friend. Maybe you never really knew me. Or maybe Vanessa's betrayal is turning you into someone you'll regret becoming. After Leo left, Dominic stared at the growing evidence wall in his home office. Photos, timelines, financial records, and now a theory that would destroy not just a marriage, but an entire family's foundation. His phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. Working late again. Don't wait up. Dominic replied. Take your time. I have plenty to keep me occupied. He turned back to his wall of evidence, adding one more note. DNA results pending. Chapter 3. Blood Revelations. The DNA results arrived in a plain envelope 3 days before Howard's retirement gala. Dominic sat alone in his home office, the morning light casting long shadows across his evidence wall. He opened the envelope slowly, the way he approached all critical information. The results were unequivocal. Genetic markers confirmed beyond doubt. Brooke Zimmerman and Vanessa Harris, Vaughn's shared father. They were half-sisters, with approximately 25% shared DNA. Dominic felt no triumph, only a cold certainty. Howard Harris, respected surgeon and family man, had fathered a child with Patricia Zimmerman decades ago, while married to Diana. He had supported Brooke financially from the shadows, but never acknowledged her publicly. And now, his daughter was having an affair with her own half-sister. The phone rang. His investigator. There's more, she said without preamble. Patricia Zimmerman didn't just work with Harris. She filed a sexual harassment complaint against him in 1985, shortly before leaving Mercy Hospital. The complaint was settled privately and sealed. Was she pressured to leave? Records suggest she was given a substantial settlement on condition of relocating and signing an NDA. 9 months later, Brooke was born. The picture became clearer. Howard hadn't just fathered a child. He'd silenced the mother and controlled the narrative. For decades, he maintained his reputation while keeping Brooke at arm's length, offering career help instead of acknowledgement. Did Vanessa and Brooke know they were sisters? The evidence suggested not. Their messages contained no hint of such knowledge, only the excitement of forbidden love. The retirement gala would be Howard's crowning achievement, Boston's elite celebrating his legacy, his family presenting a perfect image of success and propriety. The perfect backdrop for truth to shatter illusion. Dominic began preparing meticulously. He made copies of the DNA results, placing the originals in his safe. He reviewed Massachusetts divorce laws, consulted discreetly with attorneys, and secured his financial assets. Leo called repeatedly, but Dominic ignored him. This was no longer about saving his marriage or even punishing Vanessa. This was about exposing decades of lies that had culminated in a relationship built on the worst kind of ignorance. 2 nights before the gala, Vanessa actually came home for dinner. She was animated, discussing final arrangements for her father's celebration. The governor's attending, and 3 hospital boards, she said, pouring wine. Dad's thrilled. He's worked hard for this moment, Dominic replied. Building a legacy is important. Sometimes I think that's all he cares about, how history will remember him. She sipped her wine. We haven't talked much lately. How's the Riverside project? Almost complete. Just handling final inspections. He studied her face, the face he'd woken up beside for 15 years. Are you happy, Vanessa? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? With your life? With us? Are you happy? She set down her glass carefully. That's a complicated question. Not really. It's actually quite simple. We've been together a long time, Dominic. People change. Yes, they do. He reached for her hand, noting how she flinched slightly at his touch. But deceit doesn't change. It just grows. Her eyes narrowed. What are you implying? Nothing. Just making conversation. He released her hand. I'm looking forward to meeting your gallery colleagues at the gala, especially Brooke Zimmerman. You've spoken so highly of her. Vanessa's smile became fixed. You like her? Everyone does. The night of the gala arrived. The grand ballroom of the Langham Hotel had been transformed into a celebration of Howard Harris's career. Medical luminaries mingled with Boston society, examining the artwork displayed for the charity auction. Dominic arrived alone. Vanessa had gone early to help with arrangements. He moved through the crowd with deliberate calm, accepting congratulations for the Riverside project, exchanging pleasantries with hospital board members. He spotted Howard holding court near the stage, Diana resplendent in emerald beside him. And across the room, Vanessa stood with a striking blonde woman, Brooke Zimmerman, beautiful and confident, her resemblance to Howard subtle, but unmistakable once you knew to look for it. Dominic approached them. You must be Brooke. Vanessa has told me so much about you. Brooke's handshake was firm, her smile professional. Mr. Vaughn, your wife has been instrumental in our gallery's success. Please call me Dominic. I'm sure you and Vanessa have worked very closely. Vanessa's laugh was too bright. Brooke curated this entire collection for the auction. Isn't it magnificent? Truly impressive. Family connections can open remarkable doors. Brooke frowned slightly at his emphasis. Talent and hard work open my doors, Mr. Vaughn. Of course, though I've always believed blood will tell in the end. Vanessa touched his arm. Darling, let's get a drink. As she led him away, her grip tightened painfully. What are you doing? Meeting your colleagues. Isn't that what supportive husbands do? Before she could respond, the program began. Howard took the stage to thunderous applause, delivering a speech about dedication, family, and legacy. Diana beamed beside him. The perfect family portrait. And none of this would have been possible without the support of my wonderful family, Howard concluded. My wife Diana, my daughter Vanessa, and all of you who have been part of this journey. Dominic watched Brooke during the speech. She applauded politely, her expression composed, but her eyes never left Howard. The look of a daughter seeking acknowledgement that never came. After the ceremony, Dominic approached Howard. Congratulations. Quite a legacy you've built. Thank you, Dominic. Coming from someone building his own impressive career, that means something. Legacies are fascinating things. What we acknowledge, what we hide, it all comes to light eventually. Howard's smile faltered. I'm not sure I follow. Just an observation. The truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how carefully we try to control the narrative. Dominic nodded toward Brooke, who was speaking with Vanessa across the room. Some resemblances are impossible to ignore once you see them. Howard's face drained of color. What exactly are you implying? Nothing that DNA hasn't already confirmed. Dominic lowered his voice. Interesting choice, pushing your daughters together professionally, knowing what might happen. You're making dangerous accusations. Not accusations. Facts. But tonight is your celebration. Enjoy it while it lasts. Dominic moved away, leaving Howard staring after him. The first crack in the facade had appeared. Later that evening, he found Vanessa alone near the auction displays. Where's Brooke? He asked. Speaking with donors. What was that conversation with my father about? He looked shaken. We were discussing family matters. Dominic straightened his tie. Tell me, when did you first realize you were falling in love with Brooke? Vanessa froze. What are you talking about? Please. The pretense is exhausting for both of us. 9 months of lies is enough, don't you think? Her face hardened. You've had me followed. I've had the truth revealed. There's a difference. This doesn't concern you anymore. I was going to tell you after. After what? After you'd manipulated our divorce settlement? After you'd constructed a narrative making me the villain? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. He stepped closer. But there's something you don't know. Something that changes everything. Nothing changes the fact that I don't love you anymore. Perhaps. But I wonder if you'll still love Brooke when you learn she's your half-sister. Vanessa's laugh was brittle. That's absurd. You're making things up to hurt me. DNA doesn't lie. Your father and Patricia Zimmerman. 1985, the affair, the settlement, the child born 9 months later. You're crazy. My father would never. Ask him yourself. Watch his face when you mention Patricia. Dominic checked his watch. I should go. Enjoy the rest of your evening with your sister. As he walked away, he could feel Vanessa's world beginning to crumble behind him. The foundation was compromised. Collapse was inevitable. Chapter 4. Fault Lines. The morning after the gala, Dominic woke to an empty house and 37 missed calls. 12 from Vanessa, 8 from Howard, even 3 from Diana. He ignored them all, heading instead to his office downtown. The Riverside project needed his attention, and work had always been his sanctuary. Leo was waiting in his office. You look like hell. Rough night. So, I heard. Half of Boston society is buzzing about Howard Harris's meltdown at his own retirement party. Leo leaned forward. What did you do? Dominic pulled up architectural plans on his computer. I simply revealed structural weaknesses in a facade that was bound to collapse eventually. Dom, this isn't like you. People keep saying that. Maybe this is exactly who I am when pushed. He gestured to the plans. The contractor has questions about the foundation supports. Leo didn't move. Vanessa called me. She's frantic. I'm sure Brooke is comforting her. She says you're spreading vicious lies about her father. Dominic finally looked up. Did she specify which lies? Something about a secret child? She wasn't making much sense. It's not a lie. Howard Harris fathered Brooke Zimmerman with a nurse he had an affair with in the 80s. He paid the mother off, established a trust fund for Brooke, and kept his perfect family image intact. Leo's expression shifted from skepticism to shock. And you're sure about this? Dominic slid a copy of the DNA results across the desk. Vanessa and Brooke share a father. They've been having an affair for 9 months, completely unaware they're committing incest. Jesus Christ. Leo studied the report. Have you told them? I told Vanessa last night. She didn't believe me. And now she's probably confronting Howard, who's realizing his carefully constructed life is imploding. Dominic turned back to his computer. Now, about those foundation supports. Dom, you can't just drop a nuclear bomb like this and then discuss concrete reinforcements. I can and I am. The project deadline. Fuck the deadline. What's your endgame here? What do you actually want? Dominic's calm facade cracked slightly. I want them to feel the same devastation I felt. To have their certainties ripped away. To face the consequences of their actions. And then what? You think this will make you happy? Happiness was never the objective. Justice was. Leo shook his head. This isn't justice, Dom. It's vengeance. And it's consuming you. After Leo left, Dominic tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to Vanessa. Despite everything, 15 years of marriage couldn't be erased overnight. He remembered her laughter during their honeymoon in Santorini, her determination when they renovated their first apartment, her hand squeezing his at his mother's funeral. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." "Brooke," he replied with the address of a coffee shop 3 blocks from his office. Brooke was waiting when he arrived, her composed gallery curator demeanor replaced by barely contained fury. "Is this some kind of sick joke to you?" "No joke. Just facts. You've destroyed Howard's reputation with these accusations." "Interesting. Not these lies, but these accusations." "So you've confirmed they're true." Brooke's jaw tightened. "Always knew my father was someone prominent. My mother refused to name him, but the trust fund, the career help, someone was watching out for me. Howard was controlling you, not helping you, keeping you close enough to assuage his guilt, but never acknowledging you publicly." "And Vanessa?" Brooke's voice faltered. "Did you have to tell her like that? Would you have preferred I keep silent while you continued sleeping with your sister?" She flinched as though struck. "We didn't know. Now you do. The question is, what happens next?" Vanessa's devastated. Diana's threatening divorce. Howard's reputation is in tatters. Actions have consequences. Brooke leaned forward. "So do yours. Do you think Vanessa will come back to you after this? Do you think anyone wins here? I never expected a win. I expected truth. Now we all have it." As Brooke left, Dominic wondered if Leo was right, if vengeance was truly consuming him. He'd achieved his goal of exposing the lies, but the hollow feeling in his chest hadn't diminished. That evening, he returned home to find Vanessa waiting, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture rigid. "I spoke with my father," she said without preamble. He confirmed everything. Dominic set down his briefcase. "I imagine that was a difficult conversation." "Difficult? It was catastrophic. My mother's suicidal. The hospital board is reconsidering naming the new wing after him." "And Brooke," her voice broke. "How could you expose this so cruelly, as opposed to the kindness you showed during 9 months of deception?" "I was going to tell you." "When? After how many more lies? After how many more nights I sat alone while you were with her?" Vanessa's composure cracked. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't know she was my sister." "Would it have mattered? Would you have chosen differently?" She looked away. "I don't know. At least that's honest." Dominic moved to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. "What do you want, Vanessa?" "A divorce." He nodded. "That seems inevitable. I want it done quickly, quietly." "Of course you do. The scandal's bad enough without a messy divorce. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Dominic." He studied her. This woman he'd loved, built a life with, and now barely recognized. "You know what's ironic? If you'd simply told me you wanted out, I would have given you a clean break. I loved you that much. And now I want what's fair. Half of everything we built together." "Fine. My lawyer will contact yours." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Was it worth it? Destroying my family to punish me? Your father's choices destroyed your family. Your choices destroyed our marriage. I merely brought the truth to light." After she left, Dominic stood alone in the house that had once held such promise. The justice he'd sought felt empty, the victory Pyrrhic. He pulled out his phone and called Leo. "You were right," he said when his friend answered. "This isn't making anything better. What are you going to do now?" Dominic looked around at the home he and Vanessa had built, the photographs on the walls chronicling a relationship that no longer existed. "I'm going to rebuild. It's what I do." Chapter 5, Counterattack. 3 weeks after the gala revelations, Dominic arrived at his office to find an eviction notice on his door and his key card deactivated. The receptionist avoided his gaze as security escorted him to HR. "I don't understand," he told the uncomfortable HR director. "My team is in the final phase of the Riverside project. The board received serious allegations about your conduct, she explained, sliding a folder across the desk. Unauthorized use of company resources for personal investigations, harassment of clients' family members, creating a hostile work environment. The complaints were detailed, specific, and all tied to Howard Harris, who sat on the board of Dominic's largest client. This is retaliation. The board has voted to terminate your employment effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. Outside, Leo was waiting by his car. I tried to warn you. Howard's been making calls all week. They can't do this. The Riverside project is mine. It's the firm's, and they've reassigned it. Harris threatened to pull all hospital funding from any firm that works with you. Leo hesitated. And there's more. The story's going public. Not all of it, but enough. The next morning, Dominic saw the headline, "Prominent Surgeon's Career Questioned Amid Scandal." The article mentioned allegations of past misconduct and questions about professional ethics, without specifying details. Howard had gotten ahead of the story, positioning himself as the victim of unfounded attacks. Dominic's phone rang, his attorney. They filed for divorce, and it's not the standard package, meaning she's claiming emotional abuse, invasion of privacy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She wants the house, her full share of your assets, and additional damages. On what grounds? The private investigator, the DNA test obtained without consent, the public humiliation. Her father's got the city's best attorneys on this. Dominic hung up and stared at the article again. Howard had decades of connections in Boston, influence in circles Dominic had only recently entered. The Harris family was closing ranks, weaponizing their social capital. When he tried to call other engineering firms, he found doors suddenly closed. His professional reputation, built over years of dedication, was being systematically dismantled. That evening, he received a text from Vanessa. "This can still end quietly. Sign the divorce agreement. Make a public apology to my father and move on." He didn't respond. The following week brought more calculated attacks. His membership at the Engineers Club was revoked. A pending appointment to the Urban Development Board was rescinded. Former colleagues stopped returning his calls. Leo remained his only consistent ally. They're trying to isolate you, make you desperate enough to take their offer. They don't know me very well then. Maybe not, but they know how power works in this city. Harris has connections everywhere. Hospital boards, university trustees, charity foundations. Places that influence who gets hired, who gets contracts. Dominic nodded grimly. Then I need to change the battlefield. He contacted Rhonda Mercer again with a new assignment. Not surveillance this time, but a deep investigation into Howard Harris's career. Medical decisions, research ethics, hospital politics. They want to make this about my methods rather than their actions, he told Leo. I need to refocus the narrative. Leo looked concerned. Dumb. They're already destroying your career. How much more are you willing to lose? They can take my job, my house, even my reputation. But I won't let them rewrite history to make themselves the victims. The pressure continued mounting. Vanessa's attorneys filed motions to freeze their joint assets. The condo board where Dominic lived suddenly found violations requiring immediate assessment. Even his car was vandalized outside his attorney's office. But Dominic had spent his life studying pressure points and structural integrity. He knew that when external pressure increases, internal reinforcement becomes essential. He liquidated investments Vanessa didn't know about, securing enough capital to withstand a prolonged battle. He documented every instance of professional sabotage, building a countercase for tortious interference. And he waited for Rhonda's findings. They came 4 weeks later, delivered in person to the small apartment Dominic had rented after being forced to leave his condo. Harris covered his tracks well, Rhonda said, but medical records leave patterns. I found 3 cases where experimental procedures were performed without proper consent documentation, and a pattern of residents who complained about his methods suddenly transferring to less prestigious programs. Is it enough? Alone, maybe not. But combined with this, she slid another folder across the table. It creates a compelling pattern. Inside were records of Howard's hospital using a pharmaceutical protocol that Howard had helped develop and in which he held patents. Patients weren't informed of his financial interest. Conflict of interest? Dominic asked. At minimum, possibly insurance fraud. The hospital billed for standard care while essentially conducting unofficial trials that benefited Harris's patent portfolio. This was the leverage Dominic needed, not for revenge, but for defense. Howard had attacked his professional reputation. Dominic would respond in kind. The next day, he had his attorney deliver a simple message to Howard. Professional reputation works both ways. Perhaps we should discuss a mutual ceasefire. The response came within hours. A meeting requested at Howard's attorney's office. Howard looked older than he had at the gala. His confident posture diminished. What do you want? I want what I earned. My professional standing restored, the false allegations withdrawn, and a fair divorce settlement. You destroyed my family. Your choices destroyed your family. You fathered a child with Patricia Zimmerman, paid her to disappear, then manipulated both your daughters' careers to ease your conscience while maintaining your image. Howard's jaw tightened. You have no idea. I know exactly what happened. I also know about the experimental procedures, the patents, the residents whose careers suffered when they questioned your methods. The blood drained from Howard's face. Those are baseless. Save it for the medical ethics board. I have enough documentation to trigger a comprehensive investigation. Unless we reach an understanding. By evening, the terms were drafted. Howard would cease his campaign against Dominic's professional reputation. Dominic would keep Howard's medical ethical issues private. The divorce would proceed with a standard division of assets. And most importantly, all parties would refrain from public comment on the DNA revelation or its aftermath. As Dominic left the meeting, he felt no triumph, only the grim satisfaction of having withstood a concentrated attack and emerged with his future intact, if altered. Leo was waiting at a nearby bar. Well, it's over. Mutual destruction averted. Was it worth it? All this? Dominic considered the question. I didn't start this war, but I refuse to surrender to those who did. There's value in that. And Vanessa? She made her choice. Now she lives with the consequences, just as I live with mine. Leo raised his glass. To rebuilding, then? To rebuilding, Dominic agreed, though he wasn't yet sure what form that reconstruction would take. Chapter 6. Collateral Damage. 2 months after the settlement, Dominic stood in the rain, watching movers load Vanessa's art collection into a truck. The divorce had been finalized with clinical efficiency. Assets divided, papers signed, 15 years of marriage reduced to spreadsheets and legal paragraphs. He'd kept the house, but found himself unable to sleep there. Too many memories echoed through empty rooms. He'd listed it with a realtor that morning. His phone buzzed with a text from Leo. Riverside Development won architectural award. Your design, someone else's credit. Sorry, man. Another loss in a season of losses. Though the professional blacklisting had stopped per the agreement, the damage was done. Former clients remained wary, colleagues distant. Dominic had started his own small consulting firm, but rebuilding his reputation would take time. As the movers finished, Vanessa emerged from the house. Thinner than he remembered, dark circles beneath her eyes, but still elegant in her composure. That's everything, she said, not quite meeting his gaze. Where will you go? I bought a place in Cambridge, near the university. They stood awkwardly, strangers who knew each other's deepest secrets. And Brooke, he finally asked. Vanessa's expression tightened. She moved to New York. We don't speak anymore. I'm sorry. A bitter laugh escaped her. Are you? Isn't this exactly what you wanted? Everyone destroyed, connections severed. I wanted truth. The destruction was collateral damage. That's convenient phrasing. She glanced at the moving truck. Mother's in treatment for depression. Father's negotiating an early retirement from his remaining board positions. Our family name is whispered about at events we're no longer invited to. And you blame me for all of it. Who else would I blame? Your father for his original deception. Yourself for the affair. Brooke for pursuing her patron's daughter. There's plenty of responsibility to go around. Vanessa shook her head. You could have handled it differently. A private conversation, a dignified separation. After 9 months of lies? After you planned to blindside me? We both know you were building a narrative where I was the workaholic husband you'd outgrown. The divorce was going to be your liberation story. She didn't deny it. We all tell ourselves stories that justify our actions, including the story where I'm the villain for exposing the truth. The truth could have been managed more compassionately. Dominic laughed. Managed. That's always been your family's approach, hasn't it? Managing truths, controlling narratives, maintaining appearances. And your approach is better? Look around, Dominic. Look at the wreckage. Is anyone happier now? Are you? The question lingered as she walked away, elegant even in defeat, sliding into her car without a backward glance. That night, Dominic met Leo at their usual bar. The conversation drifted to mutual friends, industry gossip, deliberate avoidance of the divorce finalization, until Leo couldn't hold back anymore. How are you really doing, Dom? Managing. That's not an answer. Dominic sighed. I won. They tried to destroy me, and I survived. I exposed 15 years of lies. I secured a fair settlement. By any objective measure, I succeeded. But it feels hollow, empty. Dominic stared into his whiskey. Vanessa asked if anyone's happier now. The answer is no. Happiness wasn't your goal. Maybe it should have been. Leo leaned forward. You did what most men wouldn't have the courage to do. You refused to be a victim. You fought back against powerful people who thought they could discard you without consequences. And yet here I am, starting over at 43. Alone, building a new firm from scratch. Not alone. Leo raised his glass. Some friendships survive the stress test. Dominic managed to smile. I appreciate that. Later that week, he received an unexpected visitor at his small office downtown. Brooke Zimmerman stood in his doorway, more subdued than he remembered her from the gala. Can we talk? He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. I heard you moved to New York. I did. I'm only in town to finalize the sale of my apartment. She studied him carefully. You look different. So do you? She nodded. Finding out your father concealed your existence for decades while promoting your half-sister's career will do that to a person. Why are you here, Brooke? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. She glanced around his modest office. They really did a number on your career, didn't they? I'll rebuild. I've no doubt. She hesitated. I wanted to hate you for exposing everything. For a while I did. But the more I've reflected, the more I realize you just accelerated an inevitable collision. How so? The truth would have emerged eventually. A medical history question, a genetic testing service, someone's loose lips at a hospital reunion. Secrets this significant don't stay buried forever. Dominic leaned back. That's surprisingly philosophical. I've had time to process. And I've realized something else. I'm grateful. Grateful, not for how it happened, but for knowing the truth. I spent my entire life wondering about my father, constructing fantasies about who he might be. Now I know. She gave a rueful smile. He's a coward who valued his reputation above his children's well-being. And Vanessa? Do you ever speak with her? Brooke's expression clouded. That's complicated. The relationship was real, at least for me. Finding out we're sisters didn't instantly erase those feelings, as convenient as that would have been. But you ended it. We had to. The knowledge changes everything, even if the emotions take longer to adjust. She stood to leave. I just wanted you to know that while I don't approve of your methods, I understand why you did what you did. And in some ways, despite all the pain, you freed me from a lifetime of half-truths. After she left, Dominic sat contemplating their conversation. He'd been so focused on Vanessa's betrayal, Howard's manipulation, and his own sense of justice that he hadn't considered Brooke might eventually see value in the painful revelations. That evening, he walked through the empty house one last time before the new owners took possession. Each room held memories, arguments and reconciliations, celebrations and quiet moments. 15 years of a life he believed in, now concluded. In the kitchen, he found a forgotten photograph tucked in a drawer. Him and Vanessa on their 5th anniversary, sailing on the Charles River, laughing into the camera. He remembered that day clearly. The wind in their hair, the simple joy of being together, the future stretching bright before them. Where had it gone wrong? Had the seeds of dissolution been present even then, or had they grown gradually, nurtured by neglect and separate ambitions? His phone rang, a potential new client responding to his firm's website. As he discussed project parameters and scheduling, Dominic felt a familiar energy returning. This was what he did best: analyzing problems, designing solutions, building stable structures from foundational principles. The personal reconstruction would be more challenging, but he recognized now that it was necessary. Vengeance had not healed the wounds of betrayal. Only building something new could do that. As he locked the door for the final time, Dominic acknowledged that Vanessa had been partially right. The truth could have been handled differently, but she'd been wrong about something crucial. The wreckage wasn't his creation alone. It had been a collaborative destruction, years in the making, with every participant adding to the damage. His responsibility now was not to assign blame, but to salvage what he could from the debris and construct something more enduring. Chapter 7. Reconstruction. 6 months passed. Spring bloomed across Boston, bringing renewal to a city emerging from winter's grip. Dominic's new firm had secured 3 modest projects, not the prestigious developments of his previous career, but solid work that utilized his expertise. He'd moved to a renovated loft in South Boston, its industrial bones appealing to his architectural sensibilities. The space was sparsely furnished, but functional, much like his new life. Leo arrived one evening with takeout and news. The Preston and Associates team is falling apart on the Harbor View Tower. Structural issues they can't resolve. Not my problem anymore. It could be. The client's desperate. They've reached out discreetly. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Discreetly? They need your expertise, but don't want to publicly acknowledge it because Howard Harris's brother-in-law sits on their board. Dominic shook his head. I'm not interested in being anyone's dirty secret. It's a path back to major projects. Through the side door? No thanks. Leo sighed. Your principles are admirable, but sometimes impractical. My principles are all I have left. They ate in companionable silence until Leo spoke again. Have you heard about Howard? I try not to follow Harris family news. He's resigned from his last hospital board position. There's talk of an ethics investigation after all. Dominic set down his fork. I didn't pursue that after our agreement. Apparently someone else did. Rumor is one of his former residents finally spoke up. The information sat uncomfortably. Dominic had wanted accountability, not ongoing destruction. And Diana? Vanessa? Diana's in Switzerland at some wellness retreat. Vanessa's teaching art history at the university. Leo studied him. Do you still think about her? Sometimes. 15 years doesn't just disappear. Do you regret how things ended? Dominic considered the question. I regret that it had to end at all. But given the circumstances, I don't see how it could have unfolded differently. The next morning, Dominic received an unexpected email from Preston and Associates CEO requesting a private meeting. Curiosity overcame reluctance, and he agreed. Andrew Preston was Dominic's former boss, a veteran architect who'd built the firm from nothing. Thank you for coming. This isn't easy for me. I imagine not. The Harborview project is failing. The replacement team missed critical flaws in your original design adjustments. Preston looked genuinely pained. We need your help. You fired me, Andrew. Let Howard Harris dictate personnel decisions. I did. It was wrong, and it's nearly bankrupted the firm. Preston pushed a folder across the desk. Here's what we're proposing. You come back as a consultant at triple your former salary. Once the project stabilized, we announce your return as partner. Dominic opened the folder. The terms were generous, almost desperate. Why would I return to a firm that abandoned me? Because it's still the firm you helped build. Because these projects matter to you. Because despite everything, you're still an engineer who cares about getting things right. Dominic closed the folder. I need time to consider. Take it, but not too much. The structural issues are critical. Walking through the financial district afterward, Dominic found himself outside the Morton Gallery. The window announced a new exhibition, fragmented, exploring family dynamics through modern art. Inside, he was surprised to find Brooke Zimmerman directing the installation of a large canvas. Dominic Vaughn, she said, noticing him. I didn't expect to see you here. I was passing by. I thought you were in New York. I was. I've returned to oversee this exhibition. She gestured around. My first curated show since everything. He studied the nearest painting, fractured faces emerging from a shared background, simultaneously connected and distinct. Your work? Yes. Art therapy, my psychiatrist calls it. She smiled wryly. Creating beauty from brokenness, apparently. It's powerful. Thank you. She hesitated. Would you like some coffee? The cafe next door is decent. Over espresso, they discussed neutral topics, the art world's trends, Boston's development plans, the unusually warm spring. Finally, Brooke addressed the elephant in the room. I saw Vanessa last week. At our father's hearing. Dominic looked up sharply. Hearing? The ethics committee. They're reviewing decades of cases. She sipped her coffee. It's strange. We arrived separately, sat on opposite sides of the room, but when they detailed the allegations, we found ourselves exchanging glances. Shared disillusionment, I suppose. How is she changed? Quieter. She's throwing herself into teaching. Brooke studied him. She asks about you sometimes. What do you tell her? The truth. I don't really know how you are. The conversation shifted to Dominic's new firm, Brooks Exhibition. As they parted, she extended an invitation to the opening reception. It might be awkward, he noted. Life is awkward. Art confronts that. She shrugged. Come if you want to. It's next Friday. All week, the Preston proposal and exhibition invitation occupied his thoughts. Both represented potential steps forward, but in different directions. One offered professional redemption, the other personal closure. He called Leo for advice. The Preston offer is a no-brainer, Leo said. You'd be returning from a position of strength. And the exhibition? Riskier. The Harris family drama is finally fading from gossip circles. Appearing publicly might reignite interest. So you think I should decline? I think you should decide what matters more. Avoiding discomfort or achieving closure. Friday evening arrived with Dominic still undecided. He found himself dressing more carefully than usual, selecting a charcoal suit he hadn't worn since before the divorce. At the last moment, he grabbed the Preston contract from his desk, signing it decisively before heading out. The gallery hummed with the understated energy of Boston's art crowd. Dominic moved through the space slowly, studying Brooks' work, powerful explorations of identity, connection, and fracture. Each piece seemed to capture some aspect of the complex family drama that had unfolded. He was examining a particularly striking canvas when he sensed someone beside him. Her technique has evolved considerably, Vanessa said quietly. The fragmentation is deliberate but not chaotic. Dominic turned. She looked composed, professional in a simple black dress, though thinner than he remembered. I didn't expect to see you here. Brooke invited me. I wasn't sure if I would come until the last minute. She gestured to the painting. What do you think? It's honest. Raw without being sensational. Vanessa nodded. That's an apt description of Brooke herself these days. They stood in awkward silence until Dominic spoke. How are you, Vanessa? Surviving. Teaching keeps me busy. She glanced around the gallery. And you? Leo mentioned you started your own firm. It's growing slowly. Actually, I just agreed to return to Preston as a partner. Congratulations. That's significant. It's a start. Another silence, less tense than the first. Finally, Vanessa spoke hesitantly. My father's medical license has been suspended pending the investigation. I heard. For what it's worth, I didn't initiate that. I know. It was inevitable once people started looking closely. She sighed. He's not handling it well. A lifetime building a reputation, now dismantled. I'm sorry for your family's pain. Are you? Her question lacked the bitterness of their last encounter, sounding more genuinely curious. Yes. Despite everything, I never wanted suffering for its own sake. I wanted truth and consequences, but not endless punishment. Vanessa seemed to weigh this. I believe you. Now, anyway. She glanced across the room where Brooke was speaking with patrons. She's remarkable, isn't she? Transforming all this trauma into art. She is. We're trying to build a different kind of relationship. Sisterhood without the complications. Vanessa's smile was sad. It's challenging, but worthwhile. Dominic nodded, understanding the difficult path they were navigating. I wish you both well with that. Thank you. She hesitated. And I wish you well with your new beginning. You deserve success, Dominic. Despite our ending, I do believe that. As she moved away to greet other guests, Dominic felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release of tension he'd carried for months. The anger that had fueled him through the divorce and its aftermath was finally subsiding, making space for whatever came next. Brooke approached, champagne flutes in hand. That looked civilized. It was. He accepted the offer glass. Your work is extraordinary. Creating it saved me, I think. Helped me process everything. She clinked her glass against his. To moving forward without forgetting the past. An appropriate toast. Later that evening, standing outside the gallery under a clear spring sky, Dominic realized he felt lighter than he had in more than a year. The Harris family drama would continue to unfold, but his part in it was concluding. The revenge that had consumed him had run its course, leaving behind difficult truths, but also possibilities for reconstruction. He texted Leo, signed a Preston contract. Starting Monday. Leo replied immediately. Proud of you. First round's on me. Dominic smiled, pocketing his phone as he walked toward the harbor. The city lights reflected on the water, architectural marvels outlined against the night sky. Buildings he had helped design, structures that would outlast all the human drama that had created them. In the end, perhaps that was the most important lesson, that what we build can transcend the broken foundations for which it rises. Chapter 8. Calculated Redemption. 1 year after signing with Preston & Associates, Dominic stood on the observation deck of the completed Harborview Tower, watching sunset paint Boston's skyline in gold and amber. The project that had nearly bankrupted the firm was now its crowning achievement. An architectural marvel praised for innovative structural solutions to seemingly impossible engineering challenges. Quite a view, Leo said, joining him at the railing. Worth all the sleepless nights. Ask me tomorrow, when we find out if we won the Regional Design Excellence Award. The nomination had shocked the architectural community. Preston & Associates' dramatic resurgence under Dominic's partnership had become industry legend, a redemption story everyone loved to reference. Win or lose, you've made your point. The prodigal partner returns triumphant. Leo handed him a champagne flute from a passing server. To second acts, to building better foundations. The celebration marked not just the building's completion, but Dominic's professional rehabilitation. Clients who had once avoided him now competed for his attention. Industry publications featured his innovative approaches. Even competitors acknowledged his expertise. As guests mingled around them, Dominic noticed Brooke Zimmerman among the attendees, engaged in animated conversation with the project's lead designer. Did you invite her? Leo asked, following his gaze. She's representing the Morton Foundation. They're considering commissioning art installations for the lobby. Leo raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. She's the best in the business. And the family connection doesn't complicate things. Dominic shrugged. We're all professionals now. It wasn't entirely true. The past year had brought unexpected developments in the Harris family saga. Howard's medical license had been permanently revoked after the ethics investigation uncovered additional improprieties. Diana had filed for divorce, citing decades of deception. The family name, once synonymous with medical excellence and social standing, now appeared regularly in less flattering contexts. Through it all, Dominic had maintained a careful distance, focusing instead on rebuilding his career and personal life. His occasional interactions with Brooke remained strictly professional, and he hadn't spoken with Vanessa since the gallery opening. Until tonight, he spotted her near the bar, elegant in midnight blue, her academic position evident in her composed demeanor. She was speaking with Andrew Preston, who caught Dominic's eye and waved him over. Dominic, Professor Vaughn was just complimenting the building's integration with the harbor landscape. I insisted she speak with the man responsible. Vanessa smiled politely. Hello, Dominic. Congratulations on the project. Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here. The university's art department is advising on the installation program. She glanced at Preston. though I was surprised to receive an invitation. Preston excused himself tactfully, leaving them in awkward proximity. "How have you been?" Dominic asked. "Well enough." The teaching position became permanent. "I've published some research on artistic responses to family trauma." She sipped her wine. "And you're clearly thriving." "Professionally, yes. And personally?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm rebuilding." She nodded, understanding the reference to their last meaningful conversation. As we all are. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not the charged tension of their divorce, but something quieter, almost reflective. "My father asked about you," she said finally. "He's in Arizona now, living with my aunt after the divorce." "What did he want to know?" "If your success was as substantial as reported." "I think he's seeking perspective on his own fall." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you rebuilt through talent and determination, while he destroyed through deception and entitlement." She met his eyes directly. "I've done a lot of reflection this past year about patterns and choices. And conclusions? That we were all acting out scripts written long before we recognized them. My father's need for control and appearance, my mother's willful blindness, my attraction to what was forbidden." She shook her head. "Not excuses, just context." Dominic considered this. "I can understand that perspective." "Can you?" She seemed genuinely curious. "You were always so certain, so absolute in your judgments." "That certainty nearly destroyed me, too." He leaned against the bar. "Revenge as an architect's project, precise measurements, calculated loads, exact specifications. But humans aren't buildings." The emotional engineering was imprecise. Vanessa smiled faintly. "That's remarkably self-aware." "I've had time to reflect, too." The conversation shifted to neutral territory. Her research, his current projects, mutual acquaintances. As she prepared to leave, she hesitated. "Brooke and I have established a scholarship fund for children of undisclosed parentage seeking careers in medicine or art. We're having a small launch event next month." She handed him a card. "You'd be welcome to attend. No obligation, of course." After she left, Leo appeared at his side. That looked civil. It was unexpectedly pleasant. "Careful, Dom. Some structures can't be rebuilt once they collapse. I'm not looking to rebuild the marriage, but maybe something else is possible." "Like what?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm curious to find out." The next morning brought news of Preston and Associates winning the Design Excellence Award. Amid the congratulatory messages, Dominic received an unexpected email from Howard Harris. "I understand congratulations are in order. Your professional resurrection is impressive, if ironic, given the circumstances. I find myself pondering legacy these days, what remains after reputation crumbles. Perhaps there's insight you might share, as someone who has successfully rebuilt from ruins I helped create. If you're amenable, I would appreciate a conversation." Dominic stared at the message, memories of the destructive aftermath of his revenge still vivid. His instinct was to delete it unanswered, but something made him pause. He called Leo. "Howard Harris wants to meet." "Why?" "Ostensibly to discuss professional resilience. More likely to make peace before he dies." "Is he dying?" "He's 72 with a history of cardiac issues and a ruined reputation. Whether it's physical or existential mortality, he's confronting endings. And you're considering it because—" Dominic considered the question. "Because holding grudges requires energy I'd rather direct elsewhere." This is new. The Dominic Vaughn I've known would have printed the email just to have the satisfaction of burning it. "Maybe I'm evolving." That evening, Dominic replied to Howard. "I'm available next Thursday afternoon. Preston and Associates, 2 p.m. The meeting was set for Dominic's territory, his newly renovated corner office with views of the harbor and the building he'd rescued from structural failure. When Howard arrived, he appeared diminished from the commanding surgeon Dominic remembered. Thinner, grayer, less certain in his movements. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Howard said, accepting the offered seat. "Your email intrigued me." Howard glanced around the office, the awards displayed on the walls, the architectural models, the evidence of Dominic's restored status. "You've rebuilt admirably. I had a solid foundation beneath the damaged structure." Unlike my situation, Howard's smile was bitter. My entire career now reduced to ethical violations and personal failings. Is that why you wanted to meet? To compare catastrophes? No, to understand how you moved forward when everything collapsed. My reputation is gone. My marriage is over. My relationship with Vanessa is strained at best. Even Brooke, who might have been an unexpected gift in all this, maintains a careful distance. Dominic studied the older man. I'm not sure I'm the right person to advise you. On the contrary, you orchestrated my downfall, then rose from your own. That requires something instructive. I didn't orchestrate your downfall. I exposed one truth. Everything else was the natural consequence of choices you made decades ago. Howard nodded slowly. Perhaps that's the insight I needed. The distinction between causes and catalysts. He gazed out at the harbor. What would you have done differently, knowing what unfolded? The question deserved consideration. I would have been more precise in my target. Your deception, not your entire legacy, was the issue. The collateral damage was excessive. Surgical versus carpet bombing. Something like that. Howard leaned forward, suddenly more reminiscent of the confident surgeon he'd once been. Then let me be equally precise. I don't forgive you for exposing my past, but I understand why you did it. And I recognize that my response, attacking your career, your reputation, was disproportionate, as was my method of revelation. A moment of unexpected understanding passed between them. Two men who had each calculated destruction and lived through its aftershocks. Vanessa mentioned a scholarship fund, Dominic said. Yes, her idea, initially. Brooke expanded it. Howard's expression softened slightly. They're attempting to create something meaningful from this mess. It's more than I've managed. It's never too late to build something worthwhile. That sounds suspiciously like forgiveness, Dominic. Not forgiveness. Perspective. Dominic stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. We all made choices that caused damage. The question now is whether we continue that pattern or create something different. After Howard left, Dominic stood at his office window, watching Boston's afternoon traffic flow like a river through the city's arteries. He thought about patterns and choices, destruction and reconstruction, about revenge that had accomplished its purpose, but at costs he hadn't fully calculated. His phone buzzed with a message from Brooke. Heard you met with Howard today. You okay? The concern surprised him. He replied, fine. It was constructive. Good. By the way, Vanessa mentioned she invited you to the scholarship launch. I hope you'll come. Could use your structural expertise on rebuilding things. He smiled at the architectural metaphor. I'll be there. That night, reviewing plans for his next project, Dominic realized he felt a peculiar sense of completion. The revenge that had consumed him had run its course. The destruction it caused had been substantial, but from the debris, new structures were emerging, different from what had existed before, but perhaps stronger for having survived the collapse. Chapter 9. New Foundations. The Scholarship Foundation launch was held at the university's Modern Art Museum, a neutral space for the reconstituted Harris family. Dominic arrived exactly on time, neither eager nor reluctant, simply present. The event was deliberately small, perhaps 50 people gathered in the sculpture garden. He recognized faces from Boston's academic and art communities, a few medical professionals who had maintained connections with Howard, and several former colleagues from Preston and Associates. Brooke spotted him first, approaching with 2 champagne flutes. You came. I said I would. He accepted the offered drink. Impressive turnout. Quality over quantity. People who understand what we're trying to accomplish. She gestured toward a display outlining the scholarship program. 7 students already identified for the first round of funding. Dominic studied the profiles. Young adults with partial or unknown parentage, pursuing education in medicine, engineering, and visual arts. Important work. It's a start. Transforming secrecy and shame into opportunity and transparency. She glanced across the garden where Vanessa was speaking with donors. Her idea originally. My execution. We make a surprisingly effective team when not complicated by other factors. And Howard's involvement? Financial contributor only. It's better that way. Brooks' expression softened. He's trying, in his limited fashion. The foundation feels like atonement for him. And for you, not atonement, evolution. She smiled. Speaking of which, I should circulate. Vanessa wanted to speak with you. She's by the Calder sculpture. Dominic found Vanessa alone, studying the mobile's balanced components as they shifted gently in the evening breeze. Perfect engineering, she said without turning. Separate elements maintaining perfect equilibrium through careful design. Alexander Calder was an engineer before becoming an artist, Dominic noted. He understood structural integrity and dynamic balance. A useful perspective for all of us. She turned, composed in ivory silk, professional but approachable. Thank you for coming. It matters to Brooke. And to you. Yes, though I wouldn't have presumed. She gestured around. What do you think of our project? It's meaningful, creating opportunity from concealment. That was the intention. Something constructive from our family's destruction. She studied him. You look well, Dominic. Success suits you, as does academic life for you. I saw your recent publication on architectural influences in modern painting. She looked surprised. You read my paper? I try to stay informed about noteworthy work in adjacent fields. A genuine smile softened her features. Very diplomatic. They fell into conversation about the scholarship recipients, the selection criteria, the long-term vision for the foundation. The awkwardness of their previous encounters had diminished, replaced by something approaching comfortable familiarity. I don't know if Brooke mentioned, Vanessa said, but Howard is moving back to Boston next month. His health is declining, and Arizona wasn't the fresh start he imagined. She hadn't mentioned it. He's purchased a condo in Cambridge. Near mine, actually. She hesitated. He speaks of you occasionally. Your meeting made an impression. We found some unexpected common ground. Destruction and rebuilding, your shared expertise. Her tone was gently ironic, though you've always been better at the latter. Before he could respond, they were interrupted by the event coordinator announcing the formal presentation. Brooke took the podium, outlining the foundation's mission with eloquence and understated passion. She introduced the first scholarship recipients, each with compelling stories of overcoming uncertainty about their origins to pursue educational dreams. When she invited Vanessa to join her, the sisters stood together, their physical resemblance more apparent now that Dominic knew to look for it, but their differences equally striking. Vanessa's reserved elegance contrasted with Brooke's artistic confidence. Yet they moved in subtle harmony, completing each other's thoughts as they described the foundation's future plans. And finally, Brooke concluded, "We're pleased to announce our advisory board, composed of professionals from medicine, education, and structural engineering. These experts will help guide our scholarship selections and program development." She read the list of names, ending with, "and Dominic Vaughn, partner at Preston Associates, whose expertise in identifying and reinforcing essential structural elements will be invaluable." Dominic stared in surprise. He hadn't been approached about any advisory role. Around him, polite applause filled the garden as Brooke smiled directly at him, a challenge in her expression. After the presentation, he sought her out. "That was unexpected." "Was it?" she asked innocently. "I thought Vanessa discussed it with you." "She didn't. An oversight, I'm sure." Brooke's expression turned serious. "The truth is, we need someone with your particular insight. Someone who understands how structures collapse and how they're rebuilt. Someone who recognizes that foundations matter." That's an elegant metaphor, but it's not just metaphorical. These scholars are building lives on complicated foundations. Your perspective would be valuable. She held his gaze. "Unless you object to working with us." The question contained layers of meaning. Working with the Harris sisters meant regular contact with his ex-wife and her former lover, now reconnected as siblings. It meant potential interactions with Howard. It meant remaining tethered to the family he had once sought to expose and then distance himself from. "I need to consider it carefully," he said finally. "Of course. Though I should mention," her smile returned, "that Vanessa specifically requested your involvement. Something about appreciating your structural perspective even when applied destructively." Later, as the event wound down, Dominic found himself on the museum's terrace with Vanessa. The Boston skyline spread before them, buildings illuminated against the night sky. "You didn't mention the advisory board position," he said. "I was working up to it." She leaned against the railing. "Did Brooke ambush you completely?" "She has your father's flair for strategic intervention." Vanessa winced slightly, a comparison neither would appreciate. She turned to face him. "If you're uncomfortable with the idea, we understand. Our history is complicated. That's one word for it. But sometimes complicated structures are the most interesting, the most worthwhile." She hesitated. "I've spent a year rebuilding my understanding of family, of connection, of trust. I won't pretend the process is complete, but I've learned that even damaged foundations can support new construction." Dominic studied her. This woman he had loved, lost, blamed, and now viewed through the complex lens of shared history. "Why me, Vanessa? Why not any other engineer in Boston?" "Because you understand collapse from the inside. Because you've executed both destruction and reconstruction." She met his gaze directly. "And because closure doesn't have to mean ending. Sometimes it can mean transformation." The invitation represented something unexpected. Not reconciliation exactly, but a new configuration. A mobile of separate elements maintaining equilibrium through careful design, as she had described the Calder sculpture. "I'll consider it," he said finally, "but I need to be clear about boundaries and expectations." "We all do." She smiled faintly. "That's the lesson of the past 2 years, isn't it? Clear boundaries, transparent expectations, honest communication." As they stood silently overlooking the city they've both loved, Dominic reflected on the journey from that first manila folder of surveillance photos to this moment of potential new beginning. The revenge he had calculated had accomplished its purpose. Truth revealed, deception exposed, consequences delivered. But its aftermath had yielded unexpected possibilities. The Scholarship Foundation offered a chance to transform destruction into creation. The advisory role provided an opportunity to apply his expertise toward building rather than exposing. And this conversation suggested that even the most damaged relationships could evolve into something different but potentially valuable. "When's the first advisory board meeting?" he asked. Vanessa's smile widened. "Next month." "Brooke was quite confident you'd accept." "Was she?" She said anyone who could design a building like Harborview Tower after professional devastation would understand the value of ambitious reconstruction. Dominic laughed, surprised by the sound. She has a point. Later that night, in his loft overlooking the harbor, Dominic reviewed the foundation materials Brooke had provided. The scholarship program was thoughtfully designed, the recipients carefully selected, the mission statement clear and compelling. Despite its origins in family trauma, the initiative represented something genuinely constructive. His phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Heard you're joining the Harris Foundation board. Bold move." He replied, "Life's too short for holding grudges. Building is more satisfying than destroying." "Character development. I like it," Leo responded. "Drinks tomorrow to discuss." Dominic set down his phone and walked to the window. The Harborview Tower stood illuminated across the water, a testament to his professional redemption. Beyond it spread the city he had helped shape through his designs, structures standing firm despite shifting conditions. When his wife had demanded a divorce after 15 years of marriage, he had indeed silently nodded and signed the papers without argument. He had approached her table at that one special restaurant and revealed a truth that shattered multiple lives. But the story hadn't ended there, as he had once imagined it would. Instead, it had evolved into something more complex, a narrative of destruction and reconstruction, of truth and its consequences, of vengeance achieved and then transcended. Dominic opened his email and composed a message to Brooke and Vanessa. "I accept the advisory position. Let's build something worthwhile." As he pressed send, he felt a sense of completion different from what revenge had offered. Not the hollow victory of exposing others' deceptions, but the substantive satisfaction of creating something meaningful from the aftermath. The Harris Zimmerman Foundation would help young people build lives on complicated foundations. And in advising them, perhaps Dominic Vaughn would continue his own reconstruction as well. not erasing the past, but incorporating it into a structure more resilient for having weathered collapse and rebuilding. Some revenge stories ended with destruction. This one, unexpectedly, had evolved into creation. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.